So today we come to the climax of the story of Joseph and his brothers when they finally recognize him, when he reveals himself to be their long-lost brother, presumed dead. And it reminds me of the scene in Luke after the resurrection of Christ, where Christ is walking toward Emmaus with the two disciples who don't recognize him, the resurrected Jesus, whom they assume to be dead and buried. And then they recognize him at the breaking of the bread, and there's that moment of stunned realization, and then they reflect on why they didn't know him. Did not our hearts burn within us when he talked to us about the scriptures? Joseph is Christlike in that sense. In many ways, these figures in the Old Testament who prefigure Christ, prefigure different aspects of him. Joseph becomes an administrator, a man of wisdom, and a man of providence. He points out that had he not been sold into slavery, Israel and his family would die from the famine, which still has 5 years left to go. So it became providential, and he provides out of the store of plenty that he has made sure that the Egyptians have built up during the years of plenty. So Joseph is like Christ in the sense that he is written off, killed by his brothers, killed metaphorically speaking, sold into slavery. He's out of sight. He's out of mind. They think he's dead. They think he's gone. They were jealous of him. And yet this scapegoat, this figure that they hated and despised, becomes mysteriously a figure they don't even recognize, back from the dead, so to speak. Symbolically speaking, Joseph is back from the dead, resurrected, and from his pain and suffering, even being in the dungeon, the prison, for a long time in Egypt, he is now, as Christ can be, this figure of bounty, this figure of justice, this figure of great giving and leadership and administration. I pick on our bishops a lot, but not nearly as much as I should. What they lack is the administrative aspect of Christ the King. They don't function in a way where they can dole out the providence of God justly. At any rate, that's what Joseph does. But rather than dwell on that and the amazing end of that story, there's a little more to come, kind of an epilogue in Genesis regarding Joseph and his family. I haven't said much. I have not said really anything about the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon, which I'm sure my students have been mystified by. What is this bizarre love poem doing in the middle of the Bible? And again, hopefully you've been reading a translation that tells you who is speaking when. It's a dialogue, almost like a play. And unless you know who is speaking when the groom is speaking, when the bride is speaking, when the daughters of Jerusalem are speaking, or the chorus who are commenting on the action, you'll get even more confused. I'm going to just touch on Peter Kreeft's introduction to the Song of Songs in his book, The Three Philosophies of Life. We'll go into this more live in class. Now that we've finished the Song of Songs and you're totally confused, let's at least take a look at what Peter Kreeft makes of it. Now, keep in mind that last semester, we first read Ecclesiastes because I think Ecclesiastes is the key to the modern world. Both you and the people around you are going to be either tempted by or thoroughly taken over by the sense that life is meaningless. And then Job, where Job suffers apparently for no reason, and he struggles with that from the beginning till the end until God appears to him, and now Song of Songs. Kreeft says the message of Ecclesiastes is life is meaningless. The message of Job is life is suffering. And the message of Song of Songs, life is love. And one book leads to the other. Let's take a look at some of the best quotations from the beginning of Kraft on Song of Songs. He says here, another problem at the beginning, this is the only book in the Bible, except for the shorter version of Esther, that never once mentions God. Think about that. We don't hear God mentioned in the Song of Songs. The only book in the Bible where this happens. How can this book be the saint's favorite? He points out that it is the favorite of many saints. That question is much easier to answer because God is everywhere in this book symbolically, even though he's never mentioned. The bridegroom, Solomon, the solar king, is a symbol for God. The chosen bride, a symbol for the soul, or the chosen people, Israel, or the church, the new Israel. Symbolically interpreted, this book is the most intimate book in the Bible. It describes the ultimate purpose of life, which we found at the end of Job, the meeting and marriage between ourselves and God. This is the highest and holiest and happiest hope of the human heart. By the way, Kraft's a pretty good writer, and he does not shy away from things like alliteration. The highest and holiest and happiest hope of the human heart. The thing we were all born hungering for, hunting for, longing for. This is the last chapter of life's story, the point and purpose of it all. It is also the hidden key to the rest of the Bible. The Bible is about real life, of course. It is the most realistic book ever written. I think, my students, you're learning this. You're thinking it's going to be some sort of weird, gauzy thing that sort of is like sort of you feel at Mass. It's instead shockingly and disturbingly real. And the point of the real story of life is love. The whole Bible is a love story because God, the author, is love. Behind the appearance of a war story, a detective story, a tragedy, a comedy, or a farce, life is a love story. Thus, Song of Songs is the definitive answer to the question of Ecclesiastes and to the quest of Job. He then talks about marriage. This is a love poem anticipating the marriage of the bride and groom. Husband and wife give to each other as much as is humanly possible to give. Their whole selves, body and soul, life, time, friends, world, possessions, children, nothing is held back. Later in this chapter, he quotes the end of Revelations, in which Christ comes to his church as a groom to his bride. This is why the church must defend the integrity of the sacrament of matrimony, as much as even the top echelons of the church are playing games with it. Shame on them. Marriage is not only the key to happiness in life to those of us who are called to it, because it is the most intimate and trying and challenging forms of love, it is also a sign for our union with God himself. This is the next step from Job, he writes, the step from purgatory to heaven. Ecclesiastes' vanity, 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 all is vanity, was hell on earth, meaninglessness, the void. Job's suffering was purgatory on earth, being purged, suffering for the sake of glory and for the sake of love. And Solomon's love in the Song of Songs is heaven on earth. Now, he will eventually, and I'll show you the outline and we'll talk about this in class, he has 26 aspects of love that he says the Song of Songs elucidates. Love is a song. Love is the greatest song. Love is a dialogue. Love is synergistic. Each pair feeds off the other. Love is alive, each member of the pair. Love is gospel. Love is power. Love is work. Love is desire and fulfillment. This goes on and on. How could that simple and strange to understand little book of the Bible be about all of that? By the way, the other thing is we are constantly told that God loves us. We are never told what love is. One of the things that love is, and maybe I can pull this up. I don't think I've shared this yet. I'm going to try to do this even though I'm recording. Have I shared this? Here we go. I think I did. Well, if I did, I'm sharing it again. This is by Chesterton. Love is not just a feeling. And love is not just willing the good of another, although that's the best definition of it you can come up with. Love is one more thing. In fact, it is all these things combined. Here we go. I'm going to try to share this. Chesterton writes that a man may love God, it is necessary that there should be not only a God to be loved, but a man to love him. All those vague theosophical minds, theosophical minds, for whom the universe is an immense melting pot, are exactly the minds which shrink instinctively from that earthquake saying of our Gospels, which declare that the Son of God came not with peace, but with a sundering sword. Remember, we just read that in Matthew. Do not think I have come to bring peace. I am come to bring a sword, separating mother from son, father from daughter-in-law, etc. What does that mean, that Christ brings a sundering sword? Chesterton tries to explain. The saying rings entirely true, even considered as what it obviously is, the statement that any man who preaches real love is bound to beget hate. It is as true of democratic fraternity as a divine love. Sham love, meaning false love, fake love, ends in compromise and common philosophy. Why can't we all just get along? But real love has always ended in bloodshed. God loves us so much that he gives us the 10 commandments and tells us what we can and cannot do. God loves us so much that he's furious with us when we disobey him. God loves us so much that he will not leave us the way we are. God loves us so much that we should fear his love for us and be in awe of it. That's all in the Bible, and according to Kraft, it's all in the Song of Songs. We can talk about that more in class. But again, even romantic love is jealous, exclusive, demanding, and would cause a lover to go through any sort of suffering to attain his beloved. Even romantic love, which is just one aspect of love, is that. We keep hearing love, love, love in our homilies. We are never told how dangerous and demanding love can be. But that is what our faith is really about. Okay, we'll talk more in class.